Stanford University.
It's cool. You guys can sit. All right. So before we begin, my scoring judges, do you guys see any conflicts with any of the members? I don't think we should, but let's just double check one last time. All good? Yes, Rocky? Everyone? Okay, awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and proceed. Are you guys ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, whenever you guys are ready, are we ready to open?
Appearances from the government, Your Honor.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Elizabeth Grant, appearing on behalf of the United States.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Marra Edwards, appearing on behalf of the United States.
All right, I'll hear appearances from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Varun Aggarwal, and I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Lila Zabel,
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
will be representing the defendant in today's case, Mr. Augie Shepard.
Is there anything we have to talk about before we open?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we'd like to invoke Federal Rules of Evidence 603 and 615, which constructively swear in and sequester all witnesses in today's case.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right.
Second, Your Honor, we'd like to ask for your preferences for movement about the courtroom while approaching opposing counsel, the bench, and the witness stand.
You don't need permission to approach opposing counsel. If you're going to approach the witness, because obviously you're going to be there to be adverse witnesses on the stand, I think my suggestion would be just ask permission to approach the witness or the bench. And my rule is always, if we're close enough to high five, you're too close to me. But other than that, do whatever you want.
Yes, Your Honor.
Fair enough, Your Honor. Next, we'd like to draw the court's attention to Stipulation 8. It states that pursuant to Exhibits 3 and 6, both parties have waived all objections to the admissibility of those documents.
Okay, so you're just asking me to take note of that stipulation between the parties?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're not offering those exhibits down, you're just...
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right. You may have to remind me of that when the exhibit is shown, but understood for now.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, the government is ready to proceed.
All right. Defense, do you guys have anything before we go on?
Just one matter, Your Honor. We'd like to direct our conversation to the fact that although Augie Shepard is not physically present, he will be constructively present for his entire trial.
Understood. We'll pretend he's right there.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, defense is ready to move to opening statements.
All right, you guys are ready. The floor is yours.
Yes, Your Honor. He couldn't escape. In 2017, a man named Barry Capello was trapped. You see, he was part of an organized crime ring in Philadelphia. And around the same time, he'd been arrested for selling heroin. So Mr. Capello had a choice. Spend over a decade in federal prison or turn against the mob. Testify against them. Mr. Capello chose to testify, and he was placed in witness protection. He was actually relocated here to Los Angeles, where Mr. Capello got a new identity, new job, a new home. And for a few years, witness protection worked. He was safe. But on June 25th of 2021, all of that changed. See, that was the day that Mr. Capello ran into the defendant, Augie Shepard. Mob boss. The very man that Mr. Capello had testified against, and members of the jury. When Mr. Capello locked eyes with the defendant, he knew he couldn't escape. Hours later, today I'm here as an attorney on behalf of the United States government. And we're here because we've charged the defendant with 2 counts: murder and retaliation against a witness. Now, in order to prove those charges to you, we have to prove 2 things: that the defendant intentionally killed Mr. Capello, and that he did so in retaliation for that testimony Mr. Capello gave years earlier. And members of the jury, we have to prove both of those things to you beyond a reasonable doubt. If we do, that's it. The defendant is guilty on both charges. And that's exactly what we'll prove today. See, today we'll call to the stand a U.S. Deputy Marshal named Connor Wright. Now, Deputy Wright will tell us that not only was she in charge of protecting Mr. Capello while he was in witness protection, but she also investigated his death. And Deputy Wright will walk us through what happened before, during, and after the attack on Mr. Capello. Now, Deputy Wright will tell us that before the attack, Mr. Capello was in witness protection. But that on June 25th of 2021, he called the agent in charge of his safety in the panic. Left a voicemail saying he'd run into the defendant, he was scared for his life. And then you'll hear what happened during that attack. Deputy Wright will tell you about an eyewitness, a man named Bellamy Dempsey, who lived just across the street from the victim. Mr. Dempsey will tell you that he saw a car outside of the victim's home just before this attack, a car that matched the description of the one the defendant was using while he was in town. Mr. Dempsey will tell you that he saw a man matching the defendant's height and build pull Mr. Capello from behind and strangle him to death. And then Deputy Wright will tell you all of the evidence she found when she investigated this case after Mr. Capello's death. She'll tell us that she found a pair of jumper cables just next to the body when she found Mr. Capello on the morning of the 26th. Deputy Wright will tell you that the defendant had access to the same exact make and model of those jumper cables on the morning of this killing. And then Deputy Wright will tell you that she saw a pair of footprints next to the body as well. Size 11 shoes left by a man of the same height and weight of the defendant. And members of the jury, here's the thing. When Mr. Capello decided to testify against the defendant's family, when he decided to tell the truth, he put a target on his back. Not just in 2018, but in 2021 as well. He ran into the defendant on June 26th of 2021. There was no escape, not from the defendant. That's why, at the end of this case, we'll ask you to find the defendant guilty to both counts. Thank you.
Defense, Smith, you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, members of the jury, look a little closer. See, members of the jury, Ms. Grant has got up here and told you the story the government wants you to read. That story was full of Hollywood drama, with vengeful mob bosses and plots of revenge. But sometimes, college visit is just a college visit. And if you look a little closer, that story starts to fall apart. Because there are a few key problems with the government's story. And so today, we're going to look a little closer. Before we do that, I want to talk about the man they're calling defendant. Mr. Augie Shep is the owner of a small business, a friend to our whole community. He's the father of 2 children, a loving husband to his wife. Mr. Augie Shepard, on the night of June 25th, wasn't there for some evil purpose to kill Barry Capello. the government will agree. On June 25th, Mr. Augie Shepard was in LA on a college tour for his oldest daughter. So if you look a little closer, you're going to see on the night, June 25th, Mr. Shepard got into LA, got lunch, had some ice cream, took a tour of the campus, and then went home to sleep. Next morning, he flew out from LA, and that was it. Because members of the jury, all of the forensic evidence you're going to hear today points to one thing. Augie Shepard being exactly where he was supposed to be that night. In bed at the UCLA guest house, miles away from the scene of the crime. Today, you're going to hear from Miss Lauren Shepard. She was Augie Shepard's older daughter, and she was there with him all day on June 25th. She's going to walk you through their day and help you look a little closer at whether the state's story really lines up. And Shepard's going to walk you through everything that Augie Shepard did, from going to lunch to going to bed. And you're going to see that when you look a little closer, despite all of the circumstantial evidence the government's going to throw at you, they will not be able to prove that Augie Shepard was anywhere near Barry Capello when he died. And members of the jury, that's a problem for the government. Because today, the government has charged Augie Shepard with murder and retaliation against a witness. And that means they have to prove to you three things. First, that Augie Shepard killed Barry Capello. Second, that he did so intentionally. And third, that he did so as retaliation for Capello's testimony. And they have to prove that to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden in our legal system. It means that at the end of today's trial, once you've listened to all the witnesses and seen all the evidence, there can only be one explanation for why Barry Capello isn't here. There can't be any unanswered questions, any doubts you still have, or any reasons why you might want to look a little closer. Today, the government's not going to be able to meet that burden, because they're not going to show you that Augie Shepard was anywhere near Barry Capello when he died. So throughout today's trial, we're going to ask you to look a little closer and to find Augie Shepard not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Government, call your first witness.
Before calling our first witness, Your Honor, the government would like to move exhibits 3, 4, 5, and 6 into evidence. Pursuant to stipulation 8, as we mentioned during housekeeping, opposing counsel has waived all objections to those exhibits.
Any objection?
Pursuant to stipulation, I have no objections, Your Honor.
Okay, they're in.
At this time, Your Honor, the government calls Connor Wright.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Deputy Wright. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure, my name is Connie Wright.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a deputy marshal with the United States Marshal Services.
What exactly do you do as a deputy?
Essentially, it's twofold. Part of my job is protecting witnesses as a part of the United States Witness Protection Program. I've also been promoted to be included in criminal investigations as well.
But what qualifies you to work in witness protection and criminal investigations?
Well, I received my bachelor's degree in criminal justice in 2008. Also taken part in federal training programs for specialized knowledge in federal law enforcement. I also have a lot of experience, 14 years, in criminal investigations and being in the Marshal Service.
Did you review all of the exhibits related to this case?
I have.
Well, then let's walk through how exactly you're involved today. Do you know someone named Augie Shepard?
I do. That's the defendant in this case, and he's also a suspected cause, the Philadelphia crime family, specifically the DeBruno crime family.
Well, how about someone named Barry Capello? Do you know him?
Yes, I do. Barry Capello was also a former member of that DeBruno crime family until he was arrested for some drug charges and agreed to testify against the DeBruno crime family under that witness protection program.
Do you know if Mr. Capello ever actually did testify against the defendant?
He did, back in 2018.
Well then, Deputy, let's take a closer look at the evidence you reviewed in today's case.
Sure.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel with copies of Exhibits 14, 10, and 19. Let the record reflect I'm approaching the witness with the same. Would Your Honor like a copy?
No, thank you. I have all the exhibits here.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, earlier, Deputy, you told us that Mr. Capello was part of the Witness Protection Program in 2018. Did you give him a new identity?
Yes, we did. Gave him a new name, Tom Kline. Sent him out to Los Angeles with a new job at some place called Kline School.
Do you know if Mr. Capello's new identity was ever compromised?
No, we don't have any evidence that it was.
Well, what about on June 25th of 2021? Did you speak to Mr. Capello that day?
I did. Now, on that day, he actually saw the mob boss that he had testified against in 2018.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, at this point, we're using this for subsequent action of the officer, the steps that she took later in the investigation.
Outside the presence of the jury, what is she gonna testify that she did?
Your Honor, that she looked to see whether or not Mr. Shepard was in town as a result of him saying that Mr. Shepard was in town.
Response, Your Honor.
Yeah,
It's absolutely being used for the truth of the matter. Your Honor, if I may proffer,
sure.
it's our understanding that this is the only evidence in this case that the defendant ever saw Augie Shvaradia, the victim. And so they're using this for the truth of the matter. The defendant was aware the victim was at Kline School. It's an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter, sir.
Maybe I missed it, counsel. The words are that the defendant was in the area where the murder was, to paraphrase it. Who's the person making the statement?
Mr. Capello, Your Honor.
What is your response to counsel's argument?
Yes, Your Honor, if I could clarify for the court.
Sure.
We intend to authenticate an exhibit with Deputy Wright, a transcript of the voicemail that Mr. Capello left her. We'll then attempt to enter it into evidence. The hearsay exception for those statements is 803.1, present sense impression. All of the statements that Mr. Capello said to the deputy that day are descriptions of events happening immediately after he viewed them.
So you're saying you're gonna lay that foundation subsequent, in a second?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so then in that case, I'm gonna sustain the objection. I'm gonna strike the testimony for now, and with the understanding that if you lay foundation for the exception that you just discussed, we can revisit it. So sustained for now.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Deputy Wright, did Mr. Capello leave you a voicemail on June 25th?
He did.
Taking a look at Exhibit 14 in that folder in front of you, is that a fair and accurate copy of the voicemail you heard by Mr. Capello?
Certainly is.
At this time, Your Honor, the government moves to enter Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Okay. Counsel, your response is just briefly what? I think we talked about this a second ago, but I'll let you respond to the objection before I go back to counsel.
Yes, Your Honor, present sense impression pursuant to FRE 803.1.
Okay. What is your response to counsel's argument that this meets the 803.1 exception for a present sense impression?
Your Honor, for this to be a present sense impression, foundation has to be laid that these statements were made during or immediately after the event occurred. We've heard no such foundation so far, and therefore it can't fall into that exception.
So, counsel, Ms. Grant, my question is, you said that you were going to lay foundation. What foundation do you believe is on the record sufficient to meet this exception?
Yes, Your Honor, if I could draw the court's attention to the statement itself inside Exhibit 14.
Okay.
It states, "Call me when you get this. I think they found me. Augie Shepard just walked by my office window and we made eye contact." That statement in itself, Your Honor, qualifies under 803.1 it is clear that Mr. Capello is describing an event immediately after viewing it. That's the standard for the 3-1.
How does I think they found me fall under that exception?
Because, Your Honor, of the following sentence, Mr. Capello indicates that he's making the statement immediately after an event.
Doesn't he need to be describing the event, though? How does I think they found me? I understand your argument as it relates to he just walked by my office and we made eye contact, but I think they found me. How is he perceiving that?
Yes, Your Honor, it's his perception of the event immediately after it occurred.
Okay, last shot, then I'm gonna rule.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, it does say he just walked by my office window, but that doesn't specify any time frame. And it would be entirely reasonable for a witness to say something just happened when it happened a few hours ago. Therefore, because there is no actual indication of the time frame and there's no foundation about the time frame, this is not an exception to hearsay.
Okay, I think this is a close call. I think it was well argued by both of you. I'm gonna allow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Deputy, what did Mr. Capello say to you in that voicemail?
He called and said, "Call me when you get this. I think they found me. Augie Shepard just walked by my office window and we made eye contact."
Well, then let's move to June 26th of 2021. How did that day start for you?
Sure. We found out a 911 call. Barry Capello had been found dead in his driveway.
When you arrived at the scene, did you find Mr. Capello?
We did.
At that point, how did you start your investigation into his death?
We took 3 primary steps in investigating the death of Mr. Capello. First, we spoke with eyewitnesses. Second, we looked for forensic evidence. And third, we looked for a potential weapon.
Deputy Wright, turning your attention to exhibits 10 and 19 in the folder you have there, could you tell the members of the jury what those documents are?
Sure. So Exhibit 10, this is a statement from Platinum Vehicles, which is a car rental company that Augie Shepard, the defendant, rented his car from for his trip from LA.
What about Exhibit 19?
Exhibit 19 is the very car that he rented from that car services company.
And Your Honor, let the record reflect that I'm now holding up what is not yet in evidence as Exhibit 25. Deputy Wright, do you know what I'm holding here?
Yes, it's a pair of car jumper cables that were found near the body of Barry Capello.
Are these jumper cables and the documents we just went through fair and accurate as you remember them?
They are.
At this time, Your Honor, the government offers Exhibits 10, 19, and 25 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
They're in.
Let's walk through your investigative steps one by one, starting with eyewitnesses. Now, who did you talk to?
So we talked to a lot of neighbors, family members, but specifically we interviewed the daughter of Augie Shepard. We also talked to the neighbor of Barry Capello, Bellamy Dempsey.
Well, I'd like to talk about what Mr. Dempsey, the neighbor, told you. Did he ever tell you about vehicles he saw outside of the victim's home?
Yes. He said that right around the time of the attack, he saw a dark-colored sports car in the neighborhood.
Do you know whether or not the defendant was driving a dark-colored sports car on June 26th of 2021?
Yes, we know from those materials we just talked about that the defendant had rented a dark green sports car.
You also told us that you reviewed forensic evidence. What did you find at the scene in regards to that?
So we found a couple of footprints, shoe prints specifically, in the grass and the lawn outside Barry Capello's house. And those shoe prints matched the exact shoe size of the defendant.
You also told us that you reviewed the murder weapon in today's case. Were you able to determine what that weapon was?
Yes. We determined that a pair of nylon red and black jumper cables were used to strangle and kill Barry Capello.
Deputy Wright, were you ever able to determine whether the defendant had access to jumper cables of the same make and model that you found at the scene of the crime?
We did. We talked to that rental company, corresponded with them. We found out through correspondence with the company that they put a pair of red and black nylon cables in every single rental car they get out.
based on all of that information you found throughout your investigation, what did you do?
Well, we took Augie Shepard as a primary suspect. We investigated his possible implementation in this.
Did you arrest him, Deputy?
We did.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Do you have any major right? I'm just be asking you a few questions about the testimony you just gave.
Sure. Good afternoon.
So first, I want to look a little closer at where Augie Shepard might have been on the night of June 25th.
Sure.
You couldn't find any witnesses that saw Augie Shepard leaving or coming back to the guest house he was staying at.
No, we did not.
You couldn't find any cameras showing him leaving or coming back.
No, unfortunately, there were no surveillance footage.
You couldn't find any GPS data that shows him leaving that guest house.
Not at night, no.
Agent Wright, you actually did look at some GPS data, is that correct?
We did. We had access to the defendant's cell phone data.
That's right, you looked at the defendant's cell phone data, and there was GPS tracking the entire night of June 25th.
That's correct.
And according to that GPS data, that phone never left the hotel room.
No, the phone never left.
Alright, now I want to look a little closer at some of the eyewitness testimony that you said you relied on.
Sure.
You talked about someone named Bellamy Dempsey.
Yes, that was the neighbor of Barry Capel.
To be clear, that was the only person you could find that claims to have seen the murder.
That's true.
Bellamy Dempsey said that it was very dark outside.
Yes.
So that he actually wasn't entirely sure what color the car was parked outside was.
No, he just said it was a dark color.
Well, he actually initially thought it was a black car.
Yes.
I want to be clear, the defendant had rented a green car.
Yes, a dark green car.
Mr. Dempsey also said that he didn't actually get to see the face of the killer.
Yes, he only saw him from the back.
That's right, but it was dark outside, and so he couldn't see the clear variability, is that correct?
That is correct.
He wasn't entirely sure what the killer's hair color was.
No, he said it looked dark, almost black, but he wasn't entirely sure, no.
And to be clear, he wasn't even entirely sure what the killer's skin color was.
No, he said the killer looked white, but again, he couldn't be sure.
Alright, now I want to look a little closer at some of the forensic evidence you say you rely on. You're aware of the forensic testing of both the house and the body of Barry Capel, is that correct?
I am.
Now, you're aware that no fingerprints of Augie Shepard were recovered from the scene of the crime?
No, we believe that the killer was wearing gloves.
No DNA from Augie Shepard was recovered from the scene of the crime?
No, none.
No fingerprints from Augie Shepard found on Mr. Capello's body?
No, again, we believe he was wearing gloves.
No DNA from Augie Shepard was found on Capello's body?
No.
Now I want to look a little closer at the murder weapon that you say you investigated.
Sure.
I want to be clear, there are no fingerprints belonging to Augie Shepard on these jumper cables.
None that could be recovered.
Now, there actually is DNA on these jumper cables.
Yes.
There's DNA from Mr. Capello on these jumper cables.
That's correct.
But there is no DNA from Augie Shepard on these jumper cables.
No.
Alright, now I want to look a little closer at enemies that Mr. Capello might have had.
Sure.
Now, in your investigation, you looked at Mr. Capello's criminal history.
We did.
Do you see that binder right there?
That one
Right there.
here.
Can you open that up to what marked as Exhibit 8?
Just give me a second.
My apologies, Exhibit 9.
Okay, got it.
Now, that's a copy of Barry Capello's criminal record.
It is.
It looks to be fair and accurate.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense used Exhibit 9 in its evidence.
Without objection.
Alright, 10.
Alright, now, if you can look on that document, according to that, Barry Capello was accused of arson.
So charge number 2? Yes.
That means that there was a person who owned the building he was accused of burning down.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, under FRE 403, may I interrupt?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is referencing charge number 2, arson. Your Honor, if you look at this exhibit, that felony charge was dismissed. For opposing counsel to insinuate facts about a case that was dismissed is more prejudicial than it is probative.
Hang on a second, didn't you just not object to this though? Well, what I'm not understanding is what part of this are you okay with asking about? What part of this exhibit are you objecting to?
Yes, Your Honor. It's not the exhibit itself, rather opposing counsel's characterization of what this exhibit means. For example, Your Honor, just the fact that Mr. Campello had a felony charge that was dismissed holds no prejudicial value. But for opposing counsel to insinuate that there were victims of a felony that was dismissed does have prejudicial value.
What's your response?
Yes,
Yeah.
Your Honor. Your Honor, I'm not saying that these charges were true, or I'm not implying that these charges are true from the document. The question I asked the witness was, Barry Campello was accused of arson, and that means he was accused of burning down someone's building. That's true, and it does indicate that there may have been other enemies of Barry Campello. It's certainly not substantially more prejudicial than it is probative.
Is there anything untrue about what counsel just said, that if he was charged with arson, it means he was accused of burning down a building?
No, Your Honor, but for opposing counsel to take the extra step and insinuate that there was a victim, that there were enemies that Mr. Campello may have made in that process, does breach the line of 403.
Counsel, are you intending to ask the witness questions like that?
Your Honor, we're not asking the witness if there are actual enemies specified by this document. All we're asking is if there are people who, under these accusations, would have owned those buildings or may have been potential victims.
Okay, so I think counsel's point is well taken in the sense that to the extent that you're going to ask this witness about theoretical people that may have lived in these buildings that would have had a motive to kill the victim, I think that's a bridge too far, but I don't think we're even close to that line yet. I think the question that was posed, that was objected to, I don't think there's anything wrong with that given that this exhibit's been admitted without objection. So I'm going to overrule the objection with the understanding that to the extent that you get into the line of questioning that counsel is concerned about, that we not go there, and you can re-raise your objection at that time.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so overrule for now.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, I'll re-ask my question. That means that there are people, or a person that owns the building that Mr. Campello was accused of burning down.
Sure, possibly.
On there, Mr. Campello is also accused of extortion.
It's back in '89.
And that means that there are people that Mr. Campello was accused of extorting.
Seems there would be.
And on there are actually multiple accusations of assault.
There are two, yes.
That means that there are people that Mr. Campello was accused of assault.
Yes?
All right, now I want to talk about how well Mr. Campello was protected. Agent Wright, you were actually the one in charge of protecting Mr. Campello.
I was.
You'd say that you're good at your job?
I'd hope so.
So when you took Mr. Campello under your wing, you gave him a new identity.
Did. New name, new job, new life, everything.
That's right, you gave him a brand new name.
I did.
And you relocated him to a new house.
Yes, right here in Los Angeles.
To be clear, that's the same house where he was murdered.
That's true.
Agent Wright, you made sure that there was no public information relating Barry Campello to that address.
I did.
You made sure that there was no public information relating the alias Tom Kline to that address.
I did, to the best of my ability.
And you made sure that there was no public information relating Kline travel to that address.
That's also true.
Now I want to look a little closer about what Barry Campello might have been doing the day he was murdered. To be clear, you don't know all the people that Barry talks to
Is that day or in general?
on that day.
On that day, no. Just, we know that he talked to his wife, and that's it.
You don't know all the people he might have called.
No, we don't.
You don't know all of the people, any of the actions he might have taken on that day before he was murdered.
No, I can't be sure.
Agent Wright, you don't know if he told anybody about his previous identity.
No, we don't know.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Deputy Wright, opposing counsel asked you a lot about hypothetical enemies that Mr. Campello might have had on the morning of June 26th. Did you find any evidence connecting connecting any suspect to this crime except the defendant?
No, we didn't, and from what we know, we don't think Ari or Tom Kline had any enemies in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Can we let this witness go?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Marshal, you're dismissed.
Thank you.
Ms. Grant, do you have any other evidence?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the government rests.
All right. You guys put on a case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Shocker.
At this time, the defense calls Ms. Lauren Shepard to the stand.
Great.
May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Shepard, but everybody calls me Lori.
Do you know why you're here today, Ms. Shepard?
Yeah, my dad was accused of murder. Should we talk about it?
All right, before we get into that, can you tell the jury a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm 18, I'm Aries. I just graduated from high school. I'm really excited to start college. And I'm going to UC Berkeley in the fall.
Ms. Shepard, I want to let you help me look a little closer into what you were doing on June 25th. So where were you on June 25th?
Well, I was in LA. I was doing a college tour that day.
Were you with your dad?
I was, he's the one who took me there.
Were you with your dad all day on June 25th?
Oh yeah, we had a whole day together, and actually, we spent the whole week together. It was awesome.
All right, so can you walk us through the day of June 25th?
Sure. So we got to LA at about 10 a.m. And then we checked into the guest house at UCLA. We went to lunch, got some ice cream, and then we went to UCLA to actually do the tour. Then we went to dinner.
So, to be clear, where did you get lunch from?
We went to the Pomodoro in Westwood.
And whose idea was to go to that restaurant?
It was my idea. I was really excited to try it.
You said you got ice cream after that. Whose idea was to go to that ice cream shop?
Also me. Every time I eat, I have to have something sweet.
Alright, so now I want to look a little closer at the night of June 25th. After you got back to the hotel, what did you do?
Well, I was on my computer, watching Grey's Anatomy, had my headphones in. And, Dad was on the phone.
Do you know who your dad was calling?
No, McDreamy was on the screen, so I was pretty zoned out.
Your Honor, at this time we're going to be reading a portion of Exhibit 4, which is already in evidence onto the record.
Do you have any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead then.
Starting from page 2 of Exhibit 4 on line 11. Phone made one call to wife Carmela beginning at 5:45 p.m. on June 25th, lasting 4 minutes.
Ms. Shepard, when were you at the hotel between ice cream and dinner?
We were there from about 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Alright, and then when you got back to the hotel after dinner, what did you do?
Well, Dad went to sleep, but I decided to go out.
Where did you go out?
I went to a party with an old friend from high school. It was a college party.
When did you leave your dad's hotel room?
I left for the party at 11:30 p.m.
When you left, what was your dad doing?
Dad was asleep.
And what time did you get back to the hotel?
I got in pretty late, 3 a.m.
When you got back, what was your dad doing?
He was sleeping.
Your Honor, we're now be reading another portion of that same exhibit onto the record.
I assume no objection.
Correct, Your Honor.
Great. Go ahead.
Still on page 2 of Exhibit 4, starting at line 14. Location data places the phone at UCLA guest house from 10:15 p.m. on June 25th to 5 a.m. on June 26th. Location data shows earlier movement to Pomodoro Trattoria, UCLA campus, Mastro Steakhouse, and UCLA guest house.
Ms. Shepard, what time did you get up on June 26th?
5 a.m. I definitely paid for the night before.
And when you wake up, what did your dad look like?
That was normal.
Your Honor, this time we're going to be reading a portion of Exhibit 3 onto the record. It's already in evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
I'll be starting at line 10 of the first page of Exhibit 3. I learned Tom and Drea Kline were actually Barry and Adriana Capella. I'll now be starting at line 33 on the same page. Someone came up behind him and wrapped something around his neck. the person started to strangle Tom. Two of them fell backward to the ground. The person continued to strangle Tom from behind. Tom was flailing.
When you woke up, did you see any bruises on your father's body?
No, Dad didn't have any bruises on him.
Did you see any scratches on his arms?
No, Dad too.
Did he look injured in any way?
No, Dad looked pretty normal to me.
And did you see any stains on his clothes?
Oh, definitely not.
Alright, now I want to look a little closer at your dad's relationship with Barry Patel. Did you know Barry?
Of course, that was my uncle.
How long have you known him?
Since I can remember, I mean, I think he's been around my family for a really long time.
Alright, and can you describe your dad's relationship with Barry?
From what I know, before 2017, they were co-workers, but mostly friends. Like I said, Uncle Barry was like family to me in every way that mattered.
Did you ever hear your dad threaten your Uncle Barry?
Oh, definitely not.
Now, on the morning or any time on June 25th, did your dad mention anything about Barry Capella?
No, he didn't.
Did your dad mention seeing Barry Capella?
No.
Did you see Barry Capella?
Oh, I definitely didn't.
And did you ever see your dad hurt anybody?
Oh, no, never.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Shepherd.
Good afternoon.
My name is Elizabeth Grant. I'm an attorney on behalf of the United States government, and I'll be asking you just a couple more questions today, okay?
Okay.
I'd like to start by talking about what happened on June 25th of 2021. You were here in Los Angeles that day, right?
Right.
You were in town with your father, Augie Shepherd, right?
That's right.
And the two of you were supposed to go on a tour of UCLA.
Oh, yeah, we did.
You were looking at colleges.
I was.
Now, Ms. Shepherd, before you went on that tour at UCLA, and just like you said a moment ago, you ate lunch and got some ice cream, right?
That's right. It was really, really good.
Now, you and your father walked from the restaurant to the ice cream shop, right?
That's right. They were pretty close.
You left the restaurant at about 12:47 p.m.
From what I remember, that's about when I left.
And then you walked past the business.
I guess we walked past some sort of store. I don't know.
Now, you actually know exactly what store you passed, right, Ms. Shepherd?
Sure.
You and your father passed a travel agency, true?
Oh, I remember someone telling me about that. Yeah.
You passed Kline Travel. You remember that, right?
Yes. It is.
When you did, your father, the defendant, was with you.
That's right. He was with me when we walked past.
And at 12:52 p.m., you left the ice cream shop, right?
That's right. We got some Nutella sandwiches. They were delicious.
So you and your father passed by Kline Travel at around 12:50 p.m.
I can't tell you exactly what time, but
Sure. 12:50, it sounds about the right time, right?
sure.
Let's talk about what happened after you and your father passed Kline Travel Agency. Because you went back to your hotel that night, right?
That's right.
When you went to the hotel, you were with the defendant.
I was with my dad. Yeah.
And like you told us a moment ago, he got on the phone right away.
Yeah, he was on the phone.
Before he got on the phone, he asked you to put headphones in, right?
Right. I was playing my Grey's Anatomy out loud, and he doesn't like that.
That's a yes to my question, Ms. Shepherd. Before your father got on that phone call, he asked you to put headphones in.
That's right.
And then, Ms. Shepherd, you know how long your father was on the phone, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It was about 3 hours.
Right.
You kept your headphones in the entire time during that call, right?
Yeah, like I said, you don't stop for me breathe.
Ms. Shepherd, because you had your headphones on, well, you don't know who the defendant was talking to for those hours, right?
I have no idea who my dad was talking to. No.
You don't know who your father was talking to after you passed Kline Travel that day.
Time travel was earlier in the day. I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
After you passed Kline Travel, later in the day when your father was on this phone call, you didn't know what he was talking about, right?
Right.
So then let's talk about Barry Capella. You mentioned him on direct examination, you remember, right?
Yes, he did.
was like an uncle to your family.
He was.
I want to talk about where you were on the morning of June 26, 2021. Your Honor, at this time, the government would like to read a portion of Exhibit 6 onto the record. It's already in evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay.
Quote, time of death, June 26, 2021, between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. In between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. on June 26, 2021, you weren't with your father, correct?
That's right.
You had left the hotel.
That's also right.
You'd gone to a party in Los Angeles.
I did.
And while you were gone, from midnight to 1 a.m., you never contacted your father.
Oh, of course not. I didn't want him to know that I was out.
If he had left the hotel while you were gone, you would have no way of knowing, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think he left. He was sleeping when I got back.
That's a yes. If he had left while you were gone, you would have no way of knowing.
Sure.
So let's go back to Mr. Capella. Because like you said, he was part of the family, right?
He was.
You'd recognize a photograph of Mr. Capello and your father if I showed it to you in court today?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of what's not yet in evidence as Exhibit 18. Let the record reflect I'm approaching the witness with the same. Now, Ms. Shepard, you've actually seen this photo before, right?
I have.
It looks fair and accurate as you remember it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And like we talked about earlier, it's a photo of your family.
Right.
At this time, Your Honor, the government offers Exhibit 18.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's in.
Ms. Shepard, I'd like to talk about specifically the two men in the center of this photograph. Okay? Now, the man on the left there, that's Uncle Barry, right?
That's right.
You spent your childhood with them.
I did.
Being on family holidays with you and your family.
Yeah, he did. We used to make cookies together when I was little. It was really good.
He meant a lot to you and your family.
He still means a lot to me.
On the right is your father.
Yeah, Dad has his arm over his ear.
Now you see your father and Mr. Capello arm in arm in this photo, right?
That's right.
You know that in 2018, their relationship ended, right?
That's right.
You know why that relationship ended?
I know exactly.
Because your father told you why he ended all contact with Mr. Capello, right?
He told me it was all over the news, all over the internet. Yes, ma'am.
I want to walk step by step through what your father told you about Mr. Capello. He told you Mr. Capello had testified in a trial, right?
That's right.
He told you that Mr. Capello had testified against members of your father's family.
Specifically about his coworkers and his friends. Sure, yes.
Your father told you that Mr. Capello had talked about him specifically, right?
Yeah, but he thought.
Your father told you that Mr. Capello had said that your father, his friends, and coworkers were all part of a criminal conspiracy, right?
Yeah, I honestly couldn't believe he could say something like that.
Your father, after Mr. Capello's testimony, seemed really upset to you, right?
Of course.
He was furious from your perspective.
Yes, ma'am.
He seemed more upset to you after Mr. Capello's testimony than when his own mother died, right?
Well, yeah, because after that, my cousin went to jail. We were.
So your cousin also went to jail after Mr. Capello's testimony?
That's right.
Now your father, he started talking about Uncle Barry differently after that testimony, true?
Oh yeah, Uncle Barry's name became like Voldemort. You couldn't say it in the house.
Called him a rat, right?
That's right.
He told you, don't you ever say that rat's name in front of me again.
Yes, ma'am.
He told you that Mr. Capello was dead to your family.
That's right.
Okay? Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Ms. Shepard, I just want to have a few more questions for you to dig out here, all right?
Okay.
All right, so I want to loop When you walked past, did you see your dad looking in the window?
No, we didn't.
Did you see your dad enter Kline Travel?
Oh, no, we went straight to the ice cream.
Did you see your dad do a double take?
No.
Did you see anything unusual?
Nope, like I said, we just went to go get ice cream.
Now, later on that night, when you left the hotel, did you tell your dad you were planning to leave?
Oh, gosh, no. Dad would not have let me go to a college party. This is 17.
Thank you. Your Honor, we have no further questions for this witness.
Ms. Grant, can we let witness go?
Yes, Your Honor, I have no recross examination.
All right. Do you have any other evidence to put on before we proceed? Closing arguments.
No, Your Honor. At this time, the defense is ready to proceed to closing arguments.
All right. Before we get going with that, are the jurors, you guys good? Do you need a break? Can we proceed to closing? You sure? All right. Ms. Grant, the floor is yours.
Yes, Your Honor, may I have just a moment to set up the well?
Take your
before I
time.
begin?
Of course.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Couldn't escape. Members of the jury, for just a moment, I'd like to talk about the Witness Protection Program. Now, we've set up this program because sometimes people who are involved in criminal activity for one reason or another decide to tell the truth. They testify against other criminals. And when they do, they often put themselves in grave danger. The government knows it. That's why we do our best to hide these people, to protect them. Everything changes for these people. Their names, their homes, their lives. Every precaution is taken to keep them safe, but despite these precautions, danger still remains. Everything changed for Barry Capello after he testified against the defendant's family. And he knew he was in danger, so he relocated to Los Angeles. For years, he was kept safe. But by a stroke of simple, awful luck, the defendant found it. When Mr. Capello looked outside of his office door on June 25th and locked eyes with the defendant, he knew there was no escape. Less than 24 hours later, he was dead. That's why today we, as the government, have brought 2 charges against the defendant: murder and retaliation against a witness. And members of the jury, to prove those charges to you today, we have to prove 2 things: that the defendant intentionally killed Mr. Capello, and that he did so in retaliation for that testimony in 2018. So what evidence did we bring you today to prove that Mr. Capello was killed intentionally by the defendant? Well, members of the jury, you heard from Deputy Wright. The Deputy Wright told us that before all of this began, Mr. Capello was safely in witness protection. But that on June 25th at 12:50 p.m., she got a phone call from Mr. Capello. Members of the jury, you have the transcript of that phone call today. Mr. Capello says he made eye contact with the defendant, and it's clear he was in fear of his life. And members of the jury, you also heard the eyewitness testimony of Bellamy Dempsey, which came from the detective you heard from today. Now, that neighbor who lived across the street said he saw a dark sports car outside the victim's house on the morning of his killing. And then you saw the car that the defendant had rented while he was in town. A dark sports car. Members of the jury, we're not just talking about any old rental car here. You can't miss it. Mr. Dembski told us that he saw someone, the same build as the defendant, grab Mr. Capello from behind and strangle him to the ground. And we don't just have to take Mr. Dembski's word for it, because there is a chain of evidence that corroborates his claims. First, members of the jury, you have the autopsy that places Mr. Capello's time of death in between midnight and 1 a.m. The exact same time frame that Mr. Dembski provided to the police. And then you have the physical evidence that was left at the scene. The second link in that chain. You heard today about a set of footprints that were found outside the victim's home the morning he was murdered. And members of the jury, we have the forensic report in front of us. Tells us that someone, the same gender as the defendant, the same shoe print as the defendant, the same size foot, he was walking in the victim's yard on the morning of June 26th. And then, members of the jury, we have the weapon itself. Jumper cables. The same make, model, and size the defendant had access to on the very morning of this killing. Members of the jury, remember the testimony of the defendant's own daughter. Because that's how we know that this killing was retaliation. She told you the defendant's own words, "Capello is dead to our family, he's a rat." Members of the jury, there is frankly an overwhelming amount of evidence to place the defendant at Mr. Capello's home on the morning of June 26th. When Mr. Capello turned against the defendant's family, he put a target on his back. Proven it. As a result of his testimony, the defendant found and killed this man. He could not escape. That's why today we're asking you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
Can you read it, please?
Sure.
Whenever you're ready.
May it please the court. Members of the jury, look a little closer. Today, the state has delivered throughout this entire trial all of that Hollywood drama they promised. But they haven't delivered the evidence they said they would. So now that we've heard all of the evidence and listened to all the witnesses, we're going to walk through it one last time and look a little closer at the state's story to see exactly how it all went. But first, I want to remind you that today the state carried with them a burden. They had the burden to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Augie Shepard murdered the victim, and that he did so intentionally, with the intent to retaliate because of prior testimony. Once again, members of the jury, that is the highest burden in our legal system. Now that we've heard all the evidence, that means you can't have any unanswered questions, remaining doubts, or any desire to look a little closer. It's clear today that the state hasn't met their burden. As the defense, we didn't have a burden. We didn't have to call a single witness or show you a single piece of evidence. But we did, because we wanted to look just a little bit closer at the state's story. Let's talk about everything we found today. First, you heard from Miss Lauren Shepard, Augie Shepard's child. She told you about the day of June 25th. How they drove into LA, got lunch, ate some ice cream, took a tour of UCLA's campus, and then went back to their hotel room. How the next morning, they flew out. And how when her dad woke up, she didn't see any signs of a struggle, any bruises, any cuts, anything out of the ordinary. In fact, members of the jury, today you heard from Lauren Shepard that that entire day, she didn't notice anything wrong with her father. Not even down to the smallest double take, when he supposedly saw a man he'd been looking for 3 years. Members of the jury, when you look a little closer, the state's case just doesn't. Let's go through all of the evidence the state tried to throw in front of your face. First, let's talk about the state's eyewitness. Now, Mr. Dempsey, according to Ms. Grant, provided this perfect, spot-on profile for the defendant. I want to be very clear here, members of the jury. The state's own eyewitness can't tell you the hair color of Barry Capello's murder. The state's own eyewitness can't tell you the skin color of Barry Capello's murder. Members of the jury, the state's own eyewitness said that he saw the murderer drive away in a black car. We agree with the government. This was Mr. Augie Shepard's car. This is not a black car. Now, let's talk about the forensic evidence in this case. The state tried to show you forensic evidence from both an autopsy report and the report of an expert examiner. So let's go through all of that evidence. First, the forensic examination of the scene of the crime. Members of the jury, you heard today that nowhere in that examination did they ever find any fingerprints for Mr. Augie Shepard. Nowhere in this examination did they ever find any DNA for Mr. Augie Shepard. In fact, members of the jury, nowhere in this investigation did they find anything that actually, factually ties Mr. Augie Shepard to the house of the defendant, or the house of the victim. Next, they brought up to you an autopsy report. And this autopsy report says the exact same thing. There are no fingerprints from Mr. Shepard. There is no DNA from Mr. Shepard. The government is trying to tell you that Mr. Shepard managed to physically strangle someone to death without leaving a single fingerprint, hair follicle, or piece of DNA behind. And now finally, they show you the murder weapon. And the same story repeats itself. Members of the jury, there are no fingerprints from Mr. Shepard on here. There is no DNA from Mr. Shepard on here. There is nothing tying Mr. Shepard, the location of the crime, the dead body, or the murder. So with all of this in mind, let's take one last look at Kate's Slate story and look a little closer. According to the government, on June 25th, Augie Shepard saw the victim, didn't make a single reaction, didn't even look at him again. He didn't even know the new name of the victim, but somehow, without even knowing the victim's name, he was able to find the address of someone in witness protection without ever alerting his daughter. Then, later that night, he somehow managed to leave his hotel when he had no idea that his daughter was planning on leaving. And he managed to fool the GPS data that places him at the hotel all night long. He somehow drove to the house that he had no knowledge of the whereabouts, baited Mr. Capello to come outside, strangled him to death without leaving beyond a single piece of hair or physical evidence, drove away in a sports car that was the wrong color, then went back to sleep when he had no idea when his daughter was coming back, and just flew on like nothing had happened. Members of the jury, when you look just a little closer, none of that makes sense. The defendant didn't know where the house was. The defendant didn't know when his daughter was coming back. The defendant didn't even know the victim's new name. But the state's trying to tell you that based on an eyewitness that can't even tell you what color the defendant's hair and skin are, and forensic evidence that actually has nothing to do with the defendant, he's somehow guilty. Members of the jury, when we look a little closer, the story of the government doesn't stand up. Finds Mr. Augie Shepard not guilty. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would have you believe that the defendant having access to an object that matches the murder weapon identically is a coincidence. They would have you believe that the defendant being in LA at the time of the victim's death is a coincidence. They would have you believe that the eyewitness who saw the attacker matched him to the defendant's description was also a coincidence. That every piece of evidence on that table is coincidence after coincidence after coincidence, but members of the jury, that's no coincidence at all. That's evidence of the defendant's guilt. Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, counsel. So I'll give our scoring judges a second to fill their ballots out, and I can see here if you did that. And once I have all the ballots, we'll give some brief comments, and I'll get you guys out of here.